Hey, I'm Sam. That's Gray. We just watched The Seed of the Sacred Fig, and we're going to have a conversation about it. Feel free to eavesdrop if you feel so inclined.
بدشانسی این شلوغی ها همزمان شده با شروع کار من تو این شهر.
تو هم شعار دادی؟
شعار دادم سریعم در آوردم.
So I don't throw the word important around very often in like film discourse, but I would say the Seed of the Sacred Fig is an important movie.
Easily.
Yeah, it means a lot, it represents a lot, and it came at a great risk, and beyond a risk, a great toll. Like the risk, resulted in some consequences.
Yeah.
This director, Mohammad Rasoulof, had to flee Iran. Well, first they had to make the movie in secret.
Yeah.
And then, once it was out and being distributed, they tried to charge him with, I think, an 8-year prison sentence.
8 years.
I think that's what it was. And he, had to flee the country. He had a hard time attending the festival screenings of this movie because he was, on the lam, so to speak.
Right.
And it's not in a Roman Polanski way where he did anything bad.
Yeah.
Just because this is a pretty radical movie that is very, anti-authoritarian in the face of an authoritarian government under which he made the movie in secret.
So impressive.
I have my laptop here because I want to read the first little bit of this one review just to get the facts straight. This is the review of the film from when it's first screened at the Austin Film Festival, which I think is where it had its first screening in the U.S. From Hyperreal Film Club is the outlet. And they said, Iranian filmmaker Mohammad Rasoulof shot his new feature, The Seed of the Sacred Fig, in secret in the midst of persecution from Iranian authorities. Over the past decade, Rasoulof's films have been deemed propaganda by the Islamic Republic, which is the government of Iran, resulting in the director serving multiple prison sentences. So, not just being threatened with this new prison sentence, he had served other prison sentences previously from his prior movies. The only one of his prior movies I'm familiar with is that There Is No Evil one, resulting in the director serving multiple prison sentences. And with this latest feature, Rasoulof and some of his crew were forced to flee Iran in the face of a punitive 8-year sentencing. Yeah, so him and some of his crew. Which should never be the price of making a film.
No, never.
As soon as a government wants to crack down on a movie, you know that movie's saying something really important.
It's going to make people want it even more, too.
That's what made me want it, yeah.
Yeah.
That was the first thing I heard about this movie. I put it on my radar, and I kind of forgot about it for a long while.
Yeah,
I'm glad we circled back around to it.
Just for the whole 3 hours or so, I was just completely invested in it.
So pretty hefty movie. It doesn't feel long, I wouldn't say, except for maybe the opening act. It feels a little slow. It definitely takes its time getting going, introducing the characters. I was a little worried at the start because it felt a bit heavy-handed with the exposition.
Yeah.
A lot of the dialogue, the first dozen or so lines of dialogue all felt very expository. But luckily it's a case of kind of the film just setting up the dominoes early on, and then once that's out of the way, it starts feeling a whole lot more naturalistic and a lot more subtle and nuanced. It's very it's very clear what the movie's stance on these subjects are. It's not beating around the bush.
No.
It's not an allegorical film. It's set in the present day and it's covering real world issues. But there's a lot of subtlety in the character work.
It takes place during the, I want to say, was it 2022 protest in Iran?
That sounds right.
I think so. I wrote down the woman's name, the girl that set everything off when she was killed by the police there.
Yeah.
It was Masa Amini. I think I'm saying that right, hopefully. But there's this woman who was wearing her hijab, not in line with, she was wearing it improperly.
Yeah. But she did still have it.
Yeah,
That's important.
That is. It's so, because when you first hear about it, you think she wasn't wearing it at all.
And it's already crazy enough that it, led to her
Yeah.
being murdered by the police.
Absolutely.
Police brutality is a universal theme.
It is.
Sadly, yeah.
She's getting arrested for not properly wearing the hijab. And over the course of her being arrested and brought into custody, she was being, I believe, beaten by the police. And then she was in the hospital or whatever care unit they brought her to for about 3 days, and then she passed away. And then they tried to say that she had, was it asthma or a stroke?
They tried to say she had a stroke, yeah. They said she had a stroke, and it was just a coincidence that it was while the police were brutalizing her.
Yeah.
She just died of natural causes.
Not something we've ever heard before here in this country.
There's a pretty strong parallel to George Floyd's murder at the hands of the police, and then all the, everything that followed in the wake of that. This is like around the same time too, even, which is interesting. Kind of like a parallel murder at the hands of police, followed by an uprising met with even more police violence.
Yeah.
A lot of parallels there. And it's important to note that like this event that we're discussing right now isn't like necessarily dramatized in the film. It's almost like it's not quite backstory, because it does happen like within the time frame of the movie.
Yeah.
But we only see glimpses of it through like social media coverage.
Yeah, the real social media.
Yeah, the real social media coverage, which I think we'll talk more about that later on, the way that this movie uses social media. And by the way, we're going to keep this review spoiler free for the time being. We will get into spoilers later on, but we'll give you a warning ahead of time, so don't worry if you haven't seen it yet. I think for probably like the average Iranian citizen, this event and these protests and all that are probably going to be like common knowledge. They're part of the zeitgeist and all that.
Yeah.
As outsiders to the country coming into view, we have to kind of like play catch up a little bit.
Yeah.
And the movie does a good job, I think, in that department of not feeling like super expository. It's not like catering to a Western audience or whatever.
So we have this going on, but we also have, we're focusing a lot, especially in the first act, on the father who was gaining this new position in the government. What was it exactly that
They
he
call
was?
him an investigating judge.
Right, the judge part, yeah.
Which is a position that we don't really have an equivalent of in the U.S. judicial system.
Yeah.
But he's basically a judge who will sign arrest warrants, death warrants, like execution warrants.
Yeah.
But he's also responsible for investigating.
Yeah.
But by that they're really just mean these brutal interrogations is what we come to learn.
Because you're right, we don't have really an equivalent. We probably have some kind of equivalent, but not one that's obvious enough that I would know about. That we would know about it.
Yeah, it's like a detective combined with a judge, I guess, the closest thing, but it's more like a Guantanamo prison guard mixed with a judge.
Because he's got such cop mentality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's got full-on brutal cop brain.
Yeah.
And lots of paranoia, which is a thing that manifests slowly more and more over the course of the movie.
Yeah.
There's a really cool thing where it's set up that he's worked for the government for 20 years already, but he's just taking on this new, more more risky and more powerful position, and we see that corruption in him, and it's cool that we see that without really we never really see him do his job.
Yeah, we don't.
We see him at the office a couple times. We meet this one coworker of his,
Right.
but we see the corruption in him and this deadening of his soul purely through how quiet he is, and then later on how paranoid he is when he comes home.
Also, there is that aspect where he's at his job, his place of work, where it looks like a kind of courthouse sort of deal.
Yeah.
And you do see a lot of people getting dragged around in the background.
Yeah,
So that's
always in the background.
Always in the background.
Confining that to the background is such a good way to normalize it.
Yeah.
Not normalize it for the viewer, but to show how normalized it is for him as a person.
Yeah.
It doesn't faze him that people who are blindfolded and chained together are being shuffled through this environment that he calls his workspace.
Yeah, it doesn't. He never pays any attention
Doesn't bat
to
an
it. Not one single. They're just having conversations, and you just see it through a window or just in the distance in a hallway.
Yeah.
And it's wow, that's terrifying.
Yeah, they're just eating lunch or smoking a cigarette, and there's people who are having their lives ruined irreparably.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think in the beginning, wasn't there also this thing where he was actually feeling something for what he had to do, where he had people's fates in his hands that he had to get through within like a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
Like up to a minute or so.
But yeah, he talks originally about the first time he's being asked to sign an execution warrant.
Yeah.
And it's the person who was in the position before him resigned over it, or was like forced to resign basically, because they wouldn't sign this execution warrant because the person's like guilt wasn't certain.
Yeah.
And even if it was certain, like their crime wasn't really severe enough to be worth executing. And he's like, well, it's that classic mentality of like that just following orders thing.
Yeah, he was just following orders.
Yeah,
It's fine.
it's that old chestnut. And so he has like a moral dilemma over it internally at first, and then he's like, I have to do it. It's my job. It's that just following orders thing. And then the very next time it's brought up, it's not that he signed it, it's that he's been signing hundreds of them every day.
Yeah, it escalated like
So
nothing.
fast.
Like when he first does it and whatever, and he's justifying it to himself, you can tell that it's that growing sense of I spent most of my life trying to get here, the 20 years or so I spent working, like what am I going to do if I don't have this job? So it's like his whole identity is on the line, like having this realization. And then of course the financial stability that him and his family have.
Yeah, it's his
everything.
livelihood, his career, and his whole reputation.
His
It's all that
reputation,
rolled into
he
one,
cared a lot about that.
Yeah, more than anything. More than his own family.
Yeah. But yeah, that was such a fascinating character arc. And then that wasn't even all of what was going on in the beginning, because then you get introduced to him and see what he's going through. You're introduced to the family, the mother, and then looking after their college-aged daughters. The two of them were both in college, right?
One of them's in high school. One's in college, the other's in high school.
Right, yeah. And then through the daughter who is in college, through her perspective.
And her friend who's also in college.
Yeah. Through that, the conversations that the daughters have with the mother, and the news that gets put on, or the lack of the news.
Yeah, I love the way that this thing portrayed like media coverage. They do such a great job of showing that thing that we've all seen if you follow like the actual police brutality in the US, where it's like you see it all on social media and then you look on the actual news and they don't cover it, or they cover it from a really skewed vantage point.
Or it's like an older family member watching Fox News and they think they know everything.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, these kids, they don't know what they're doing. And it's all just riots, and they'll learn one day. We have to guide them in the right direction.
Yeah.
That kind of deal.
You see the like the us versus them mentality. Like he's always talking about like them. He's talking about like and he's calling them like agitators, and like they're violent, and he's afraid of them. But he's not afraid of anybody at the same time, because he's got that masculinity thing going on.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Even though he's looking out the window so often while it's raining.
Lost like tears in rain.
Yeah, tears in the rain. Oh, even in the shower. It's like he's not looking out the window, he's looking out the glass.
He only takes a shower so he can cry and his tears can't be seen. That's it.
God.
Yeah.
And then that scene where he's getting like the spa treatment.
Yeah.
So dramatic. That
it got like a little surreal in that one moment. It's the only time the movie does that, and it's like 45 minutes or an hour in.
Really wonderful.
There's this one like surreal sequence. It's very evocative, and then it goes back to being like 100% like a realistic feeling.
Yeah, it
does. And it works. It doesn't feel like out of place or anything.
Yeah, the way the music got brought in when that was...
Oh, great soundtrack throughout. Yeah,
so
that was like the first moment where it really stuck out, and then again when it's like when we're seeing like one of the injuries that one of these protesters received, really evocative music there, and then a couple other times throughout the rest of the movie.
Yeah, because it gets intense. With
it gets real
drums,
intense.
I think it was.
Yeah.
So fucking good.
So we're introduced to the dad, and he seems like he's going to be the main character at first. We're going to be following his perspective. But pretty quickly, we jump to focusing almost exclusively on his wife, the mother, and then the two daughters.
Yeah.
We stick with them throughout the rest of the movie. And I'm wondering now that we're talking about it, if that was a case of like, we're following him when he has a perspective that's like worth following. And once he's been corrupted by the establishment, the filmmaker is saying, we can't empathize with this man anymore, so we're not going to show his perspective anymore.
It's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, that might be reading too much
Powerful.
into it, but
No, I think you're onto something, because I remember when Zone of Interest got put out, there was that whole conversation in the film discourse, online, whatever, about what you should depict and what you shouldn't when it comes to like anyone that's in line with fascism or
Yeah.
is just a fascist. It's like, how much do you shed a light on, and then when do you pull away from it? When do you show them doing really mundane activities and whatever? Because there is that emphasis that you want, where it's like, this is a normal person, and like
Yeah.
they have like normal human emotions in the family and whatever. But yeah, I think that was, if it wasn't the reason for the choice, it still makes it a really solid one, because it worked in its favor. It just left this kind of foreboding, is that how you say it?
Yeah.
Like foreboding energy of like, what's this dad up to?
Yeah.
We know where the younger people are mentally, and we know what their beliefs are for the most part. And like, how are these two things gonna eventually clash?
Yeah.
And then the mom's like in between it. She's like going back and
she's
forth.
like caught in the middle, but you can tell she's such an interesting character.
Yeah.
So complex, that mother
Very.
character. I mean, really, all the leads are very complex, but the dad definitely becomes a little more one-sided toward the end. Still like really complex in his like starting motivation and in terms of like what his goal is by the end.
Yeah, and how far he's gonna go.
Yeah, like you don't know where he's going to draw a line, or like even if he's like redeemable, is he redemptive? Can he still be like a family member?
Yeah.
Or is he just like inhuman at a certain point with what these things he's doing that we don't really see any of? But we see the ramifications of what he's doing. We see the protests, and I think this is where we should talk about the use of like real protest footage.
Yes.
Because this movie, I think part of it is the movie feels a little like claustrophobic at points, because so much of it takes place indoors.
Yeah.
It does go outside eventually, like especially at the beginning and the ending. It kind of bookends with these like more external locations, but they're in a big chunk of the middle. We're kind of like locked into their home, and I think part of that is just a byproduct of having to make it in secret. But yeah, so that brings us to the way that this movie uses social media. Instead of depicting the protests, like instead of dramatizing them, we are shown social media videos mostly that the daughters are watching on their phones,
Yeah.
that they're seeing on social media and whatnot, or that they're like being sent by like a friend of theirs who's in the protest from the front lines.
Yeah.
And those are at least mostly, if not entirely, real social media footage from these actual protests that happen, which is a
Yeah.
great way to tie, because like the film itself isn't like based on a true story, but it's set against the backdrop of real events.
Yes.
Whereas the story of this family is fictional. They're 100% fake. They're not based on a real family or anything.
Right.
The dad, who's a judge executioner, is more like a stand-in for the like government itself that he represents,
Yeah.
and not a particular cog in the machine. That's what he is, but yeah.
Yeah.
It's very cool to see these social media videos used that way.
Absolutely.
And they feel so real because they are so real. It's the kind of thing where like whenever a movie tries to like create a protest, it's like never as chaotic and like
it's just not, like, you can feel how not real it
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
even when they do a really good job, it still feels like orchestrated.
Yeah. Because, like, when you're on the ground in something like that, there's this very unique energy to, like, what people are doing and saying, and, like, the community aspect of it, that you just, I don't know if you can capture it with a performance. I haven't seen anyone do it quite well enough.
Right. Oh, I just blew the candle out.
That's it.
Oh, so you mentioned earlier the like how it's the younger daughters who have a perspective that we can empathize with a lot more. And I think that speaks to one of the movie's best strengths on like a thematic level is this like generational divide that it's looking at, which is a thing that again it like crosses borders. It's like a universal thing where like the dad, I think in addition to representing like the government at large, that it also represents just like the older generation who are stuck in their ways and not just resistant to progress, but terrified of it, and they respond with violence when they're afraid.
Yeah.
And he's like epitomizing all of that, as are the police that we see. But importantly, again, we only see the police ever through the social media footage. We only see real police responding violently to real protests.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And on the subject of the generational thing, it was so fascinating because one, I don't remember ever feeling like another movie anywhere from anywhere has reflected so much of what we're currently living through. Just the entire structure of what we've been living through in the U.S., I know for sure, but we're kind of just seeing all these things happening in, worldwide. There's so many protests, so many escalations of authoritarianism, fascism. We see the fucking Nazi movement rising.
Yep.
It's actually insane with how that one far right party, I think in Europe, you brought up, was getting support like unlike anything beforehand.
Yeah.
Unless you were talking about like Nazi Germany and shit.
I think it was Germany.
Yeah.
Germany is the one that, yeah.
That's the one, yeah. So seeing that represented in this movie, and I'm sure I'm not, people can probably relate a lot if you live in this country. I haven't seen a lot of movies made by people from Iran. Like, it just hasn't been on my radar. They don't get pushed well enough here. But seeing that reflected in their movies is such a, it's such a shock in a way, and a really good shock of like, oh,
Yeah,
we're all so
absolutely.
much more, we're all so similar in like the struggles we face than we could ever realize, because when we think Iran, we think of like Call of Duty, Modern Warfare games.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Like,
That's usually like the only depiction we're exposed to as Americans.
It's so
Unfortunately.
awful. It's so bad.
Yeah. In the depiction we're seeing, that's what results in this guy having to go on the run from the government, because he's showcasing these like progressive ideals.
Yeah.
This march toward progress that the government doesn't want people
Yeah.
in or outside of the country being exposed to.
Yeah, it's just crazy that we're all seeing this rise in authoritarianism, totalitarianism, fascism, and we're all seeing the younger generations rising up against it.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Often college students.
Yeah, often college
on campuses
students, yeah.
trying to protest and being met with horrific police violence.
yeah, we saw
Yeah.
that a lot this year with all the protests for Gaza and like Palestinians
Yeah,
in
still
general.
ongoing.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
you would see
every day.
the encampments, and then even professors would join in with them, and then professors would get arrested and brutalized and everything. So it's just everywhere, even in, I think someone I follow on social media is a guy he's Japanese, he's in Japan organizing and covering protests for Palestine. And it's very it's pretty popular over there too. You just see younger people in the streets like supporting the fight for freedom for people in the Middle East. It's crazy. But yeah, like seeing that represented, it's so cool. It was such a shock. And then with how they chose to use that real footage, such a good idea. The way they used it, it felt so, it didn't feel like it was preying on any emotions.
No,
Like,
it feels
like
so
other-
organic
yeah,
to the
so
moment.
organic, because
And it's-
everyone's kind of been there, where you're just on
Yeah.
social media and you see it and you're like, oh, yeah. What
Yeah.
was it?
And it's a thing that the movie returns to throughout. It's not like they lump it all together, like Black Klansman shoved it all in this like little
Yeah.
montage at the end. This is a thing where it's like, we see it when the character comes across an instance of it. It's all completely organic, and it's just in service of creating the real environment that this story is set against the backdrop of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It really makes you feel very connected and especially invested in the well-being of the younger characters.
Oh, yeah.
Like, just constantly being on their side, like, no matter what. Like, whenever anything bad was happening, I was like, I'm on their side. Like, if anything, like,
Absolutely, yeah.
they need to be okay at the end of this.
Yeah, but I would say
yeah.
that the movie is like, it's well written enough with like good enough characters that somebody who had the dad's real opinion,
Yes. Mhm.
I think if you like just looked at what the dad said in those arguments, someone who had that dad's opinion would feel validated by what he says. He wouldn't
Yes.
feel like mischaracterized or misrepresented. You would hear those words and go, yeah, that's the truth. You tell those kids or whatever.
Yeah.
Like it's not like it's not like setting up a straw man and like, making it like an easy win. It's creating a real like nuanced back and forth argument where everyone thinks they're right in that situation. Obviously, we're going to side with the kids who are going to be on the right side of history. But in the moment, he's the guy who's siding with the people who are in power. And importantly, he's always invoking God.
Yes.
That like God is on his side, and that's why he's right. And you just have to believe unflinchingly in these things. And it's like you were talking about how it's like it's not even like true religion that he's like.
It's not. Invoking.
It's this like distorted version of it that the government uses to keep people oppressed.
Yeah, it's kind of how we see that Christian nationalism stuff over here.
Exactly.
But like with their government over there, from what I understand with the wearing of the hijab and everything like that, it's supposed to be, if you practice the religion, you're supposed to feel the urge yourself to want to wear the head covering and everything like that. I think they use the term like veiling or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to be a deeply personal connection with the practice of it. And so when the government's just saying you have to do it, you're taking away someone's ability to be able to make that choice for themselves. So it's just like they're using God and like the practice of their religion to say, oh, this is what you have to be doing and we're doing this for your own good. And then it's like through that, like you're just going completely against the religion. It makes no sense.
Yeah, it's a way to oppress women at the end of the day, which is the thing this movie explores very thoughtfully. And they set it up early on, like before they're really talking explicitly about like the head coverings directly. They're talking about like nail polish, like the daughters and their other college friend they're like doing nail polish they're plucking their eyebrows and stuff, and the mom is like, make sure you take off that nail polish before your dad gets home, like don't let him see it on you. And then that escalates to like the actual head coverings out in public and whatnot, and because like obviously that's what directly led to the real woman being murdered that caused all these protests. And then there's a great moment towards the end. It's not really a spoilery moment, but there's a moment where the dad, in spite of his own like best interests, he takes the time to give like a judgmental look to a woman who isn't wearing a head covering, even though it's like a thing that is directly against his own goals. He can't help himself but be so judgmental that he harms his own best interests.
Oh my God, it reminds me so much of growing up, being around a lot of very Christian people, where they say that they're Christian, and I've been around other, especially younger people that have been, churchgoers and whatnot, where it feels like they genuinely believe in what the Bible is actually like, giving messages about, with like, always supporting people that are needy and like giving to the needy and helping people, your neighbors, all that. But anyway, I would just be around these family members that would say how important it was for you to be Christian, and how could you ever be moral if you weren't practicing Christianity. But then out in public, they would be the most judgmental people towards especially homeless people, and I'd see them yelling at them, telling them to go get a job, and like, what are you doing, and all this stuff. And it's like, okay, like it's so like universal with the way these people just claim that religion, and then they're simultaneously just using it to cover up like how fucking judgmental they actually are.
Their own judgments and their own prejudices.
Yeah, it's so evil. Like
it's
so
evil. So often religion as a justification for evil. That's what my I gotta plug my book. That's a perfect segue for it. Anyway, we were just talking about how people use religion as a justification for evil, which is one of the core themes of of my novel, South of the Mason-Dixon. Check yourself out a copy today.
When I first finally got hold of this through, was it like the Kindle?
Probably.
Yeah, it was like that free trial deal. I picked it up on there, and I could not put it down, and I did not know what to expect, because I kind of know that you have a fixation on violence like I do, and portrayals of like you go as hard against religion, like the especially organized religion and homophobia and whatever that we connect on. So I was like, what is he gonna do? And I swear to God, like, just the characters and the way it escalates is so fucking good. I swear, like it is a good book to recommend on the topic of violence and people's use of religion. It is very good. Yeah.
Thank you for helping me plug that.
I have to say what I think, and you know, because if you were plugging a book that was bad or didn't make sense, I would say boo. What are you doing? But this shit rocks. I really hope this gets made into something like an adaptation one day.
I really want to make it as a movie.
It'd be so fucking good.
I'm trying to.
But yeah.
People like the script, but not enough to give me money to make it.
It's because they get a little scared.
They do, yeah.
When you get that in the face of evil, you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I'm not even kidding when I say that. There was a producer who read the script version of this and liked it a lot, and he was like, "Do they have to be a gay couple? Could they just be a straight couple?" And I was like,
"Did they have to be gay?" Yeah. Actually, I'm sure that has nothing to do with why these people hate the couple so much. Right.
It's pretty core to the book.
But yeah.
Back to the seed of the sacred fig. Are we ready to get into spoilers?
I think so.
Okay, I think we're going to get into spoilers now. So if you haven't seen the movie yet, we highly recommend it. One of the year's most important and just like all-around best movies, to be sure. Easy. Go check it out. Seed of the Sacred Fig, if it's playing near you. If it's not, look for it on VOD or whatever.
Because I was going to bring up the one thing about the gun. Because the gun, that's such a big part.
The gun is such a big part of the movie. Yeah.
That's kind of the catalyst for the conflict in, like, the... Because there's a lot of other stuff that's happening that gets the tension.
There's a ton happening, but the gun becomes like this linchpin of the drama in sort of the second half.
Yeah.
Kind of the last third, it becomes extra relevant, but it's there from the beginning. It's there from like the opening scene.
Yeah.
The very first shot is like bullets being set down.
Oh, yeah.
So they set it up real early. And I think they're doing a thing where the bullets are being equated to like seeds. And then at the end, when he's buried in the ground, it's like a tree sprouting up with the gun next to it.
Yeah, and then that one shot after they pulled out the shrapnel, the buckshot.
Yeah, the buckshot.
Yeah, and she was holding it with the blood. And those really looked like seeds.
Yeah, like seeds and like soil, the way she's cupping it, and then just down the drain it goes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so powerful.
There's such great like visual symbolism in this movie. Like I also loved just a couple other visual symbolism moments that I guess are a little spoilery. At the end, there's a point when the dad is walking around holding a gun and a camera in the same hand.
That was so
That's
good.
such a concise and powerful image right there. There's that thing where the mother's on the street, and they had already talked about the television earlier. There's that conversation about like, the TV says it's true, and then do you believe everything the TV says? Is the TV always right? And then the stuff about like, the TV doesn't show what's on social media, so it's already a big thing, right? And the mom doesn't believe it. She's just siding with the dad. She has the blinders on. And then she's out on the street. She gets kind of caught up in it, and she's just driving around.
Yeah.
She comes home and turns on the news, expecting to see it covered, and it isn't.
Yeah.
And that's like her kind of like first wake-up call. It took seeing it and then not seeing it depicted, not seeing reality reflected through television, for her to get a wake-up call that, oh, my kids are right about this.
Yeah.
And then I love that she turns it off, and the next time we see her in the TV, she's staring at the turned-off TV, the blank screen.
Yeah, so fucking amazing.
Because even a lack of information is more truthful than misinformation.
It is, yeah. And that's such a powerful way to show it, because it's so striking. When I didn't realize that first, before you pointed it out, where the reality wasn't being reflected, and she was noticing that, like, it took me a second. But then as soon as it hits that she's sitting there and it's dark and she's staring at nothing, basically, it's like, oh, yeah, that feels very, it slaps you in the face. Because it's like, I feel that so often when I know that something's happening, I'm trying to find coverage of it. And then instead of coverage, I find conservative news outlets. I'm like,
trying to spin it. And
it's like, fuck it. And I just turn off everything. I'm like, okay, like I can't. But it still like haunts you.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Yeah, the symbolism was insane, with especially the gun and the camera. I wanted to know more of your thoughts on that one, because to me it was like there was that heavy focus on using a camera for people's confessions and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Where it was like there was a threat of violence outside of the camera.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that idea of like forcing a perspective that doesn't actually exist
Yeah.
and capturing that on camera. It's the idea of like you see someone's confession on camera and there's a guy behind the camera holding a gun, you know, that idea?
Yeah.
Like that coerced confession kind of situation.
Yeah.
And then so you combine them into one image and you make it like crystal clear.
That was insane.
And then I think
Yeah.
that extends beyond that into like the way that the news is covering it and whatnot. Like the news is perpetuating violence by depriving the public of the information regarding that violence.
Yes.
Like the news not covering it makes it go on and on a lot more extreme
Yeah, it does.
than it would otherwise.
Yeah, it fuels all those people who think they're so much more right on the issue, who
Yeah.
end up acting out in violence against protesters and whoever, and like minorities. Like we see a rise in hate crimes going up in
Yeah.
the United States.
And it allows people like the mother to keep the blinders
Yeah.
on. Like the dad sees it firsthand, so he knows what's going on, but he only knows it from that distorted perspective where the people who are being brutalized and everything, oh, they deserve it.
They deserve
They had
it.
it coming, whatever, that
Yeah.
whole thing. And then the mom is the person who, like, the media is designed to, I guess, like, shelter in a way, but shelter in, like, a very controlling, manipulative kind of way.
It's catering to them in a very
Yeah.
specific way.
Yeah. It's catering to them, and it's like, oh, this person could also be radicalized like these younger people, so we need to not feed them the ammunition that would radicalize them.
Yeah.
Deprive them of that to keep them in their, like, comfort and their, you know,
Yeah.
what's that expression? The
Not sure.
ignorance is bliss.
Oh,
That's what
yes.
it is. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's the
classic.
ignorance is bliss.
Okay. Yeah, it is. And it is very interesting to see how it affects people in such different ways regarding like the age, how they grew up, where they grew up, like the environmental factors and all that.
And it's so ironic to me that this filmmaker is accused by this authoritarian government of creating propaganda.
Yeah, they do that all the time.
Because the film is designed to expose the effects that propaganda has on
Yeah.
the society.
Easily,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, it's so on the nose with why they would ban it.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, I wanted to mention Akira Kurosawa's Stray Dog.
mm,
Because that movie, I would guess, probably had an influence on this, or it's just like a coincidence. But Akira Kurosawa.
like Akira Kurosawa.
Yeah. So in oh my God, Kurosawa. One of Akira Kurosawa's older movies is Stray Dog. Not like super old, but like a little bit older. Anyway, it's about a police officer who loses his gun.
That's amazing.
And then he spends the rest of the movie trying to find it, like desperately searching for his gun, which is a big part of the second half of this movie. This investigating judge loses his gun. One of the other visual symbols that we didn't talk about is the dad's ring.
Yes, I was gonna bring that up. I'm glad you remembered.
So the first time I noticed the ring, it wasn't actually the dad wearing it. It was when it was the other person wearing
Yeah.
it. When the daughters are brought in, and the mother too actually, are brought in for an interrogation.
Yeah.
That's like the first time that the dad is starting to suspect his own family. That's like the first like big notch up in his paranoia, and then it goes a lot further. But when they're being interrogated, there were blindfolds that are purposefully like up a little bit so that they can only see down right in front of them, which I didn't even think about until now. But like that's such a great, like I'm sure that's the real thing, but it's also like a great visualization of the way that government wants everyone to have blinders on. Only like look down at your own feet. Don't look at what's happening around you.
Absolutely.
That's a great little visual parallel there.
It's great, fantastic.
That wasn't even why I brought that up. I didn't even think of that until just now.
Yeah.
But I brought it up because they can only see what's down, and they focus on the ring, this like big ring that the guy's wearing, who puts this like confession form kind of in front of him.
Yeah.
And then we see that the dad is wearing that same ring, or he probably was wearing it earlier, but I didn't notice it until I got like that emphasis placed on it. And then it's a good way to tie the dad to the institution. He's a cog in the machine, complicit in all this chaos that's going on. And then that ring is the last thing we see of him when he's buried alive. It's the ring on his hand sticking up, the gun on the ground, and the ring sticking up in the air.
It's so funny because the first time I noticed that ring on the other guy, my only thought at the time was like, wow, what good taste.
Yeah.
And then it took me, I was like, I wonder. Because, like, here, we don't see, in the West, we don't see a lot of adult men in these higher up positions really, like, getting these very pretty looking rings.
It was like
on
a
their
big,
fingers.
it was a little green, right?
It was like an emerald kind of deal. Yeah, it was very, very pretty. Not pretty what it was representing.
Exactly.
But
Yeah.
it was so funny, like, making that connection, because before I was like, oh, I thought you just had a good taste in fashion.
Yeah.
It's never
Turns out he had a
good.
bad taste in fascism.
Oh.
But anyway, circling back to the ring, at the end of the movie, I love that all you see of him is the ring, and he's buried, and it's so, like, poignant. It puts a nice little bow on the overall message of the movie. The fact that it's the youngest daughter who buries the elder patriarch. It's so perfect thematically.
Yeah, it comes just like, it's just a big circle, and then it just ends there. And I don't know what I expected the ending to be. I didn't expect it to be that, though.
No.
And it's, when it lingers on that shot a bit, and like the dust is settling, you see, I think it's the sunlight coming in or something. Just so beautiful, like the way the hand is posed and everything. It really does look like it's symbolizing like a tree.
It's the seed. It's the seed that sparked a revolution, and then because in the quote at the beginning was something about how the seed that nourishes life will also choke itself or whatever.
It'll like eat or choke itself.
So it's like about how the youth that were bred into the society will overthrow it in a positive way. It seems like a negative thing at first, like when you just read that quote in isolation, but it's saying that, like, oh, we can, like, the children are our future, whatever. The children
it's
will
always true.
we'll choke off the old guard. We'll bury the old guard as the dam is buried.
I love that, because there's so much to be found in that one statement we've always heard, where it's like, the kids are all right. The kids are all right. I trust them a lot. Maybe not with everything, with like Fortnite and whatever, but like with like the future of things, with progress as societies and politically, like there is so much there.
It's the thing about how society always marches forward, but the people don't always stay in tune with it, like as they get older.
It's very, very complex, but very just, it feels like a breath of fresh air, where it's like, it's about time someone did a movie like this, a story like this.
Especially from like an older filmmaker. Like, he is probably like older than the dad or of his generation at least. But he knows, he's open-minded. He's not, he hasn't had his mind closed like the dad in this movie did. Wanted to talk about, very briefly, because we've already been talking about like what happens in it, but just how crazy that tonal shift is in the third act. How it goes from being like hyper-real, like social familial drama into like out and out thriller, borderline horror territory.
It was freaking me the fuck out for oh my god. Just how quickly you go from thinking or just wondering what the dad is gonna do, if we're ever gonna find out who has the gun. And then it's escalating on the ride out to that other location where he gets into that car chase.
There's a car chase.
Gun, like, that's looking, he's pointing a gun at these random civilians, and they just like fuck their shit up, and then they just keep going, and then he locks his family in separate rooms.
He like imprisons them in like cells.
Because it's like that's all, you brought it up, the only thing he knows is like prison kind of environments now, so he's just gonna recreate what he knows and treat his own family.
He treats his family that way, even like right down to the on-camera interrogation techniques and all that.
It was terrifying. I did not know. I felt like he was going to kill one of them.
I think he was ready to.
He was.
He definitely was. I mean, he was brandishing a gun. It's also crazy that the implication is that killing his family would preserve his reputation. That losing the gun would destroy. It's like losing your tool for violence will destroy your whole political career. But murdering your own family member will preserve
Yeah.
that same career.
That's also interesting because with those protests, it was very based around women's rights specifically. So it's also saying a lot that, you know, the lives of women, like, in relation to him, were far less important
than the gun.
Yeah, than his own just career and the gun and everything. It's like he didn't see them as equal people.
Yeah, they're lesser than the firearm.
Yes,
Yeah.
easily.
Great film. We highly recommend it.
So good.
Yeah.
One of the best of the year.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like no question. Because, yeah, it's about that time of the year where everyone's like, oh, this is the best movie for the year. You have to see it. This is one of those movies.
Yeah.
You gotta give it some time, like, to appreciate it.
Big recommendation. Check it out
Yes.
and leave us alone.